All right, so continuous integration. So GitHub Actions is relatively new to GitHub. It's GitHub's kind of native way of doing this, but the more general term for this kind of thing is called continuous integration or continuous integration / continuous delivery, sometimes just called pipelines or development pipelines. And the short version of this is that it's a way of kind of standardizing and automating a set of actions or processes that you want to take when something happens to your code. So you can think of it as like an event listener or something. You do something to your code and then it triggers a series of actions. And typical things would be you submit a PR. So you're working on a project or you have some code base at work, you get tasked with something, you create a branch for your feature, you write the feature. Once you feel like it's working, you submit a PR, and then that's gonna trigger a whole bunch of actions. So probably the code is gonna get built. So the entire project, or at least the part that you're interested in, is gonna get built somewhere, probably in a fresh environment. And then if that passes, then some unit tests will be run. You can have other things like linters, you can have code coverage checks, you can do basically anything you want. And then if those tests pass, it can go on to the next level, maybe not just unit tests, but integration tests, so testing your specific piece of code with the whole project and so on. And oftentimes, especially in larger code bases, there are different series with different pipelines. So you could have you have an initial development pipeline. If it makes it all the way through that, it goes into maybe like in initial some kind of initial code base. If it makes it through that, it goes into a quality control code base, and if it makes it through that, then it gets pushed to production. So this process can be as complicated as you can make it, but that's the basic idea. So how is this relevant to what you're doing on your personal projects? So I think it's a good idea to implement something like this, and it's fairly straightforward with GitHub Actions and other tools as well. You don't have to just use GitHub Actions, but I'll show you how to use GitHub Actions. So a couple reasons to do this. One, it's transparent. It's consistent and it's transparent. So every time someone pushes up new code, the same set of processes are going to happen. So the code is going to get rebuilt in an environment, the unit test will get run. So those are the two things that you're probably going to want to do for sure. So there's just no questions about, oh, I forgot to run unit tests and then I pushed my code up, or we're pushing up code, but then it turns out that there's a problem with some dependency, so the whole project won't get built. Maybe it runs locally, but doesn't run on the server. Whatever, there's all kinds of issues that can come up here. So it's just a way of creating consistency. So we're going to go ahead and use GitHub Actions. So I've created a React app here, which it doesn't really matter what this is. It's just something. And this also doesn't even matter, but I'll do this anyway. So here's some React app that I have. So I'm going to create a new repository on GitHub, and I'm going to push this up. So here I've got a new repository. You can call this GitHub Actions demo. This is just the normal stuff we would do anytime you create a repository. Okay, so now I have my local repository on GitHub. Okay. So in terms of working as a group on a project, I'm also gonna, it's not just about GitHub Actions. I'm also gonna suggest a couple other things. One, if you go into settings and branches, you can add branch protection rules. So again, this is just my suggestion. So I'm nudging you strongly, but I'm not gonna make you do anything. But if you don't do what I say, then I'm gonna be very upset and I'm gonna hector you until you do what I tell you. But it's your choice. So branch protection rules, you can add a rule here. And the basic workflow that we're going to create, so let me just tell you right off the bat. So the basic workflow that we're going to create is you're going to have your master branch, and your master branch or main, whatever you want to call it, is going to be it's going to be like your production branch. So that's very special. You don't want to mess with it. So you're not going to be directly working with the master branch. So we're going to create a development branch, which will feed into the master branch, but the development branch is going to be what you interact with. So we're creating this kind of intermediary. So there's a layer in between what you're doing and then the master branch, which we'll pretend is like the production branch. So you'll have the development branch. And then when you want to create a new feature, you will fork. And then when you want to push up to the repo, you'll push to the development branch. And then the pipeline will run on the development branch. So it's going to build the project, run the tests. And if it passes, then what we're about to set up here, it's gonna automatically create a PR to the master branch. And then someone will manually approve that PR and it will get merged into the master branch. So that's the basic workflow that we're going to be creating here. So in order to facilitate that, we're basically going to prevent people from pushing directly to master. So I'm going to do a couple things. One here, so branch name pattern, this will be master, this will be main if you're using like whatever name your primary branch is. So we're going to require status checks before, actually you're not going to do that. We're going to do require pull request reviews before merging. So another thing is that you're going to have to, you can't just, on your own be pushing things up. So there's going to have to be some kind of check on what you're doing. So you have teams of 4. So I would suggest 2 people. So any PR is going to have to be approved by 2 people. So this just makes sure that people aren't just kind of willy-nilly throwing things up there. So I'll make this 2. So you have to have 2 required proving reviews. And then I'm also going to check this box down here, which is include administrators. So if I'm the one who has created this repo for the group and I don't check this box, then I will be able to still push to master. So if you check this, then everyone's in the same boat. Okay, so I'm going to create this rule. You can listen to my keyboard and decipher the password. Okay, so now, so I've already pushed up. I did my initial push, right? So if I now try to, if I make a change, and I do add, I'm just not going to bother with commit names. Now I get an error. So remote rejected, failed to push some refs. So the error is it's a protected branch and at least 2 approving reviews are required, right? So even though I created this repo, I've prevented myself from directly pushing. Okay, so that's the first part. So now the master branch is protected. So the only way to push the master is gonna be through GitHub with 2 approvals. Okay, so the next thing is to actually start creating the actions. And the way you're going to do that, how you're going to tell GitHub what you want to do, and how is you're going to has anyone ever used a YAML file? I think a couple people have run into that. Would anyone like to describe YAML?
I think it's just like a hierarchical way of writing instructions. So it's kind of like it's like the Python version of XML, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like how, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I describe it. It's like the Python version of JSON or the Python version of XML. So it's a structured data format, but instead of using like curly braces or tags or whatever, it just uses tabs. So it looks a lot cleaner than JSON. So in order to start using GitHub Actions, what you're going to have to do is you're going to create a folder at the root level. So in this case, my site, and it's going to be called .github. And then within that, you're going to have a folder called workflows. So .github and then workflows, and then you can have a whole bunch of different workflows. We'll just have one, and I can call it. And the extension can either be YAML or YML. Both work. Okay. So if I do something like this, then GitHub will automatically know. It will automatically know what to do. So I don't have to do anything special. And we see this Actions tab here, which I haven't set up. But you can play around with this. There's a big third-party ecosystem. So if there's something you want to do, there's a good chance that someone else has already written an action for that. So I'm going to copy this. So this will be so here is what our very basic initial workflow is going to look like. So here's the YAML. So name, you can call this whatever you want. And then we have these 2 keywords, on and jobs. And by the way, if you use other pipeline systems or other continuous integration systems, they all look very similar. They're just kind of variations here. But on is what is going to trigger something. So this is the trigger. And we can say on push, and then the branches, we can pass it an array, or you can just have a single one. So anytime there's a push or a pull request to the development branch, and remember we're creating this special development branch, then we're going to kick off everything else that's going to happen here. And we can also include this here, and this just makes it so that you can manually trigger the build through the GUI on GitHub. So you don't have to include this, but why not? And then the jobs is going to be what you want, and you can have lots of jobs. So this is one job, and this is a job called build. You can call it whatever you want. This is called build, and you have to tell it what environment it should use. And there are a lot of different options. You can also have multiple. You can choose multiple environments, and so there are ways if you want to test. Is this going to work in with Node? Node version 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 15. You can test all of that here. So there are ways of doing that. So this is going to run on Ubuntu latest. And then the steps. So these are going to be the individual actions, basically. they're going to, all these steps taken together are going to be what this particular job is. So here, this uses keyword is, I'm going to use this third party action. So you can look these up. They're freely available. They have documentation. So this is an action called checkout. And this is just basically going to clone down your Git repo. And then I'm using another third-party action called setup node. And this is going to install node. So I'm using the LTS, the is it long-term? What is it? It's the long-term stable version. So I forget what if that's actually stands for long-term stable, but it's the so anyway, you can choose whatever node version you want. This would be a sensible default. And then what I actually want to do here, so this is all basically just setup that I have to do. What I actually want to do is run this. npm CI is like npm install. So I'm going to install the project. So this is not doing a whole lot, but it's basically like, will this even build in the first place? So this would be the most basic thing you'd want to do in a pipeline. Okay, so I've got this going. So now what I want to do is I can't push up to master anymore. So I'm going to create a development branch. So git checkout-b. And then I'm going to push, also add everything. Okay, so now I push that up. That's all normal. But if I go here into the actions, I should, maybe I might have to refresh it. Oh, I'm in the wrong repo. What am I doing? So in my repo here, I go to actions and I can see that this has automatically started for me. So I can click here and click here again into build. So this is the job that I called build, right? I called it build. And then it will run through all of these steps. So setup job, you get a lot of stuff you don't need to worry about, but you get logs for each step. So setup node, install the, okay. So you can see here's the command that I ran. And this looks very similar to what you'd see if you did this on your own system, right? Because it's, that's basically what it's doing. So it runs all these jobs. It didn't fail. So this is now green. This passes. So that's great. So now I can be reasonably sure that my code at least has the minimum level of functionality. It can get built. And if I know that I'm going to be running in production on Ubuntu latest, then I can be sure that at the very least my code can get built. Okay. But we don't just want to build. We can make this as complicated as we like. But we're going to do just a couple more things. So we'll build it, and then we're also going to run our unit tests. So we're going to add another job. And this is not the most efficient way to do this, but I just want to show you how you can have one job and so on, one job after another. So there's some redundancy here, but that's fine. So we have our old job here, this build job, and now we have this new job called test. And there's some repetition here, but the important thing we care about is npm test, right? So it's going to run npm test. You can of course run npm test locally, but maybe you forgot to do it, or maybe if there are 100 commits, 100 different people making 100 different commits, then someone is going to forget to do it. So if we set up a pipeline, we can be sure that this is going to run every time. There aren't going to be any weird local quirks, like someone installed an extra dependency, so their code works, but it doesn't work on production because there isn't this extra dependency. Okay, so we have this. So I'm gonna probably should create a new branch. So So git add. So I'm kind of like mimicking the workflow you would have, right? So you check out your feature branch, then you go back to development, then merge, what is it? So I merge my feature into the development branch, and now I'm going to push. So okay, so I push the development, and now if I go here, you see this automatically kicks off, right? Because that's the whole point of a pipeline. And now we have this. So we're going to go through this build job, or this build first. And then if that completes, if that's successful, it's going to move on to the next one. So and in, by the way, in like a large app, I mean, this pipelines can take hours to run. So things like efficiency, like this is not efficient, but so that kind of thing can become important. So let's look at tests. We can see it's only going to run that single default test that comes with React app. Okay, so this test failed. So you can see what happens if the pipeline fails. So that's no good. So the test failed because I didn't change this. Does it learn React? No. Let's check. Yes, learn React. Okay, so now I'm just going to push up again. Okay, so that should kick off a new build. Probably take a minute.
So Chad, am I understanding it right? If that job fails, then the merge doesn't happen. Is that right? Is it
Well, we
kind of
don't. Yeah, so we don't
stopping
necessarily
it
have
from
it
happening?
set up that way. So let me see. So if we look at our commit history, so I believe this is the one. Yeah, so this is the one that we just did, and what was the first one? New feature. I think it was just new feature. So I think it does. I mean, you can prevent that.
I assume you would
didn't-
want to prevent that.
I should
Because
have
that's-
changed something else. Yeah. Let me go here. Yeah, I should have probably tried something else, but. Okay, so this this passes now. And so everything's good. So what we care about now is this pushing to master business. So we're going to add one more thing. Which is going to be making a pull request. So this will not happen if it fails. So again, we're making this final thing dependent on the previous two. So it's going to, I'm using, again, this is another third-party action. And then just following the documentation. There's nothing necessarily obvious about a lot of this stuff, but this is how it works. This GitHub token will be automatically generated, so you don't have to worry about that. And we're going to push to master here. Okay. We'll add. And you can see you have this third. We'll have to wait for all of this. The guy next to me at work had a Rubik's Cube. So as we're waiting for pipelines, you would just do that. So you can get yourself one of those.
Here, Chad, go for it.
I might be good at getting you to a random starting position. Okay, test passes. So let's take a look here. Great, so it looks like that worked. So if I go now to pull requests, I have this new pull request. I can go here. And you can see, because we've set it up with permissions, that there's review required. So I could add a review. You could potentially, so, even though I wrote this, I could add a review. Review changes. I'll just approve. My changes are awesome, but there's still one more. So I have one approval. I'm still waiting for one more. So this can't merge until someone else approves it. So that's the basic idea. You just add some. It's not too much work to get something like this, and I think something like this would be, basically what you want. You can of course add more things, but this just creates some consistency. So that's it.